There are voices in history that change everything, voices that rise above time itself. When Amelita Galli-Curci first sang, critics did not compare her to other sopranos. They compared her to the heavens. Her tone was liquid silver. Her high notes soared like birds set free. Audiences fainted, cried, and swore they had never heard anything like her. She was a miracle, and she knew it. Yet the miracle came with a cost. Because Amelita was not a product of conservatories or vocal coaches, she had no master to guide her. She was self-taught, an outsider who shattered every rule of bel canto singing, and still rose to the very top. That raw, untamed gift made her unstoppable, but it also made her vulnerable. Opera houses from Milan to New York begged for her. Crowds lined up for hours just to catch a glimpse of the woman called the Queen of Bel Canto. By the 1920s, her voice was preserved on records that sold in the millions, proof that she was not only adored on stage, but worshipped in the homes of ordinary people. And yet, with every triumph came a shadow. For hidden beneath the glamour was a fragility no one could see, a fragility that would soon betray her. Amelita suffered from a goiter, a growth in the throat that caused pain, weakness, and fear for the very voice that defined her existence. Doctors promised her a cure, a simple surgery. They assured her that her golden voice would remain untouched. But fate was merciless. The scalpel slipped, and the world's Nightingale, once unstoppable, once immortal, opened her mouth to sing, and silence followed. This is not just the story of an opera star. It is the story of devotion to art pushed to the edge of human tragedy. A story where glory and despair walk hand in hand. This is the rise, the triumph, and the heartbreaking downfall of Amelita Galli-Curci, the diva who died for her voice.
She was called the Nightingale of the century. Her voice was so pure, so agile, that audiences wept before the final high note. Amelita Galli-Curci didn't just sing, she floated above the orchestra like moonlight on water. Critics said her tone was touched by the divine. Her fans believed it. But behind that voice, behind the radiant gowns, the breathless ovations, the international fame, was a woman fighting a silent war. A war that would eventually cost her the very thing she lived for, her voice. This is the haunting story of the soprano who conquered the world, and then lost everything in a single, irreversible moment. Amelita Galli was born in Milan in 1882. She wasn't born into music, she was born into poetry. Her first dream was to become a writer. But the universe had other plans. When her voice was discovered, even she was surprised by what came out. It wasn't just beautiful, it was impossible. Her range, her coloratura, her precision. She trained not at a conservatory, but mostly by herself, watching, mimicking, devouring the arias of the greats. She studied piano at first, and it was through understanding music theory that she began to shape her voice with surgical control. By the time she made her operatic debut in 1906 as Gilda in Rigoletto, she was already a phenomenon. Europe adored her, but America worshipped her. When she crossed the Atlantic and made her U.S. debut in Chicago in 1916, opera critics were stunned. One review simply read, "The audience forgot to breathe." She became a box office sensation, one of the highest-paid sopranos in the world. Her recordings sold in the millions. Her voice, captured on early shellac discs, became the standard for vocal purity. What made Galli-Curci special was not just her technique, though it was flawless, it was the intimacy of her sound. She didn't belt, she didn't overpower, she sang as if she were whispering in your ear from another world. You didn't just hear her, you believed her. But as her fame soared, so did her pain. For years, she struggled with fatigue, neck tightness, and vocal strain. Doctors diagnosed her with a goiter, an enlargement of the thyroid gland. It was benign. But it pressed on her vocal cords, narrowing her range, adding effort to every breath. Still, she sang through the pain. And then came the choice. In 1935, against the advice of colleagues and with the encouragement of physicians, Galli-Curci agreed to a thyroid operation, a relatively new procedure at the time. The promise was simple. The surgery would remove the goiter, relieve her symptoms, and restore her full voice. She went under the knife in Los Angeles. She never sang the same again. The surgery had damaged the delicate nerves that control vocal agility, the very ones that allowed her to soar, leap, and float through arias. Her range was suddenly clipped. Her agility vanished. The ease that had once defined her voice was replaced with stiffness and insecurity. The Nightingale had been caged. She tried to return to the stage. She gave recitals, hoping the magic would return. But audiences could hear it. She was not the same. The critics, once enchanted, became merciless. Some said she should have never come back. Others mourned what was lost. Eventually, she stopped performing altogether. But here's what many don't know. Amelita Galli-Curci never blamed the doctors. She never gave a bitter interview. She never publicly lashed out. She simply faded into silence, with dignity. She spent the rest of her life in quiet reflection, surrounded by music but no longer part of its stage. She taught, she wrote, and above all, she listened. She died in 1963, almost 3 decades after her last true performance. But even in death, she remained a mystery, a ghost of a voice that once touched the heavens. Today, Galli-Curci's recordings are still studied by sopranos around the world. Her phrasing, her breath control, her otherworldly pianissimi, they remain unmatched. She was the soprano who could make a whisper sound like a prayer. But her story is more than just a tragedy. It's a warning, a lesson in fragility, a reminder that the human voice, especially the operatic voice, is not indestructible. It's flesh, nerve, emotion, and in Galli-Curci's case, sacrifice. She gave the world her voice, completely, joyfully, recklessly. And when it was gone, she gave us something even more powerful: silence. The kind of silence that echoes forever. She was the diva who died for her voice. And we will never forget her. She was the voice of a generation. A soprano so pure, so effortless, that critics searched for words, and still fell short. Amelita Galli-Curci didn't just perform opera, she embodied it. Her sound shimmered like moonlight over still water. Her phrasing, her agility, her impossible high notes, they weren't just admired, they were worshipped. But behind that ethereal glow was a woman burdened by expectation, by relentless touring, by a throat that grew more fragile with every encore. And in one irreversible moment, under the cold lights of an operating room, her world went silent. A simple surgery, a cut too deep. And the golden voice that once held the world in awe was gone. They called it a medical mistake. But to her, it was something closer to destiny. Because Galli-Curci wasn't meant to last. She was meant to blaze, brilliant and brief, like a comet no one could catch. She never returned to the stage, never tried to sing again. But she never disappeared. Her records still echo in dusty libraries and forgotten vinyl. Her name whispers through conservatory halls. Her tragedy lingers in the hearts of those who understand what it means to lose not just a gift, but a piece of your soul. And in that silence, Galli-Curci still sings. Not in sound, but in legacy. A voice once called divine, now eternal. Face mask, this is opera Brownn. And this is how we remember the voices that changed the world, even when the world stopped listening.
Her voice once soared like light through stained glass, flawless and eternal. But even the greatest voices cannot escape the silence of time. Amelita Galli-Curci gave the world beauty that can never be replaced. Yet behind her triumphs lies a tragedy that should never be forgotten. In her rise, we hear the brilliance of human possibility. In her fall, we hear the fragility of human fate. And in her legacy, we hear a warning that even the most divine gifts come at a cost. A century has passed, and still her recordings shimmer with the same magic, the same heartbreak. When we listen, we are not just hearing an opera singer. We are hearing a soul that sacrificed everything for its art. And that is why we tell her story. Because legends like Galli-Curci deserve to be remembered, not only for their glory, but for their humanity. If this story touched you, share it, so her voice continues to live. And if you want more secrets, more shadows, and more unforgettable journeys from the world of opera, subscribe to Opera Brownn. Because here, every note has a story, every diva has a secret, and every legend has a price.